Hey, everybody. It is a Tuesday edition of the Bullpen with Adam the Bull. It is Tuesday, January the 17th, 2023. Got a new computer. Hopefully you'll notice a difference in the picture. I got a new haircut. You can see my bald head on top. Very short haircut. Got the beard going. I'm looking like Brian Dable if he was actually sexy. So a lot to get to today. Speaking of coaches, the Browns have a new defensive coordinator. We'll talk about him, who he is, and what to make of it. Plus, the NFL playoffs are underway. We'll look back at the 6 games this weekend and look ahead to the 4 games this coming weekend. That's all on this Tuesday Bullpen with Adam the Bull.
Podcast is not for the faint of heart.
And I do think it's time for the Browns to move on.
It's not for those who ride the fence.
He's proven nothing.
But if you're looking for someone who tells it like it is about Cleveland sports,
Everybody does fandom their way.
you've come to the right place.
I don't think he's any good.
It's time for the Bullpen with Adam the Bull.
Yes, it is. It is time for the Bullpen with Adam the Bull, and the Browns have a new defensive coordinator. In case you've been under a rock for the past, 10 hours? Nah, more like 7 hours. The new defensive coordinator of the Cleveland Browns is Jim Schwartz. You know, a while back, somebody mentioned Jim Schwartz to me, I would say about a year ago, 9 months ago, and my first reaction to Jim Schwartz was, don't really care for him. Don't like him. And then we forgot about it. There's no reason to talk about it. And as we came back to a decision on what to do with the Browns defensive coordinator position, and his name came up, and as I've thought about it this past week and looked more into, some of the advanced numbers on his defenses, it seemed to make more and more sense that Jim Schwartz would be one of the top options for the Browns. I think all along Brian Flores and Jim Schwartz were the two best choices, and I think for a couple of reasons, ultimately. Now, listen, Brian Flores reportedly has some head coach opportunities, so that may be part of the reason that Jim Schwartz may have been more interested in the opportunity than Brian Flores. We don't know that that's the case, but that would make sense. But there are some real things here that make sense. Jim Schwartz has the most experience. Brian Flores, believe it or not, has never actually been a defensive coordinator. He was a defensive position coach, and then he was a head coach with, as from a defensive background, but he never actually been a DC. Obviously, Jim Schwartz has spent a number of years as defensive coordinator. In a variety of different places, and has had a lot of success. And in the end, if it was, and I think this is not a huge deal, but in the end, if it's close between the two guys, Jim Schwartz has more experience. He also plays his base defense is a 4-3, as opposed to Brian Flores, whose base defense is a 3-4. Now, a lot of reason to like Brian Flores, many reasons, including his aggressiveness, his wanting to blitz as much as he does. I also thought he had an edge maybe in like a little nastiness, but from what we've heard over the past couple of days, and it really started on the Friday when our good buddy DeQuell Jackson came on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, as he does every week, starting this week on Thursdays, but until now he'd been coming on Fridays for the most part. And DeQuell said, hey, I don't know, I didn't play for Jim Schwartz. However, the guy's in the league a long time. He's a great player. And from talking to players, that Jim Schwartz is a hard ass, like we're looking for, no-nonsense guy, and has been known to get the best out of players. Jim Schwartz started his NFL career with the Browns, of course, and Bill Belichick. He was a scout. Personnel scout, 93 to 95. And then he stuck with some of the staff that went to Baltimore from 96 to 98. That was his first coaching job in the NFL. He was an outside linebacker coach for the Ravens, 96 to 98. 1999, he was at the Titans as a defensive assistant. 2000, he was with the Titans as the linebackers coach, and then he was the the Titans defensive coordinator very successfully from 2001 to 2008. Then he went on to be the head coach of the Lions. Did not a great job as a head coach in Detroit. They did make the playoffs once, but overall they had a very poor record in Detroit. He coached there for 5 years, was 29-51. Again, in 2011, his third of 5 years, he finished 10-6, but no better than 7-9 in his other 4 seasons in Detroit. After that, he went right to Buffalo as their defensive coordinator for 1 year in 2015. Took a consulting position, didn't have a coach's job, was a consultant. I didn't know this, but I was just reading this. Schwartz took a consulting position with the NFL's officiating department to provide a coach's perspective on officiating decisions. And then in the middle of that season, he was offered the job to be the Dolphins' defensive coordinator in 2015, and he turned it down because the coach there, Kevin Coyle, had been fired. The following year, he became the DC with the Philadelphia Eagles, and eventually was their defensive coordinator when they won the Super Bowl. During that time, when the coaching staff was blown out at the end of the 2020 season, he became a senior defensive assistant for the last 2 years for the Titans. A little unclear exactly what he was doing. He was not their defensive coordinator. Apparently, he wasn't involved with game day coaching. He was more of a sounding board and a mentor, I guess. But anyway, he obviously has a long, for most of the last 20, from 2001 through now, he has spent 5 years as a head coach and 8, 9, 14 years as a defensive coordinator. So 19 years, Jim Schwartz has been either a defensive coordinator or a head coach since 2001, 19 of those years, of those 22 years, whatever it is. And so, obviously, the guy has a ton of experience. He's an older guy, not too old, though. He'll turn 57 before the season starts. And so there's a lot of positives when it comes to Jim Schwartz. I know some of the negatives that people could point to are the fact that he does not blitz a ton. And I know we all love the blitz, and I got caught up in everything else, and I wanted a coach that was going to blitz and be, hair on fire. But I do like the fact that he plays with an edge. And I was saw an interesting story here that I wanted to read to you folks. This is from the Akron Beacon Journal. Chris Easterling covers the Browns for the Akron Beacon Journal. I don't know Chris. I mean, I know I've heard his name recently, but I don't know him personally. And there was some interesting comments from who was it that he interviewed? I'm losing my mind right now. Robert Smith. That's who it was. Robert Smith was asked by Chris Easterling, what he thought about Myles Garrett in Jim Schwartz's defense. Now, Jim Schwartz is known for if you missed the discussion about this on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, check it out from today. Get a little closer here. G talked about the wide 9 defense that Jim Schwartz got a lot of hype for in Philadelphia, and the basics of it. Go back and check out the segment we were talking about it on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. But basically, the defensive ends line up either kind of like one more man outside than they do in a more traditional 4-3 style of defense. So it's almost like it's almost like you pretend that there's guys lining up where they do, and then another guy next to them, that's where they'd be instead of that spot that's been vacated. I would think that Myles Garrett having a little more room to run, a little more freedom on the outside. Yeah, he's got to make up another step, but it's harder for the tackle to get his hands on him. And with Myles Garrett's speed and athletic ability, I think this seems like it could work for him. So Robert Smith, was a good player, played for Jim Schwartz. And played for the Browns, and he said, let's see, he said he's going to thrive, man. I don't with that guy, man. Shoot, I don't see much where he can't, but this right here, he's definitely going to love this a little more. I'm assuming they're probably going to stay in the 4-3 of some sort with Garrett out there, man. I don't think no one's going to be able to block him away the way Jim lets him go. You know what I mean? So I think the scheme, if Jim is running the scheme, I don't know. It could get scary, man. Very scary. Now, this is just one player's opinion. It's January 17th. We're 7 months or we're 8 months away from the start of the season. There's a long way to go. You know, this time of year, we're all excited. It's Browns fan tradition. We're angry as the season goes along, cascading into the ultimate anger when they lose the final game of the year, as they often do to the Steelers, wanting coaches fired. And the second they hire a new coach, head coach, coordinator, whatever it may be, we all convince ourselves he's the right guy. And I don't think I'm convincing myself, but, you know, he wasn't my first choice initially. But what the hell? I mean, we're all just guessing. Even the teams are guessing who's going to be the perfect fit. But optimism is now high, and you read articles like this, it makes you feel even better. Whether it actually means anything, I don't know. More comments from Robert Smith. Again, I'm reading some of these parts of the Chris Easterling article, Akron Beacon Journal. So shout out to him. He says, this is more from what Robert Smith said. You got to think back to those Javon Curse days. And those guys, the way they were able to get off the ball and cause havoc. And Garrett's, oh man, almost twice as big with the same type of speed. So it could get scary, very scary. In other words, Robert Smith thinks that Myles Garrett is going to thrive in Jim Schwartz's defensive game plan. And in the way Jim Schwartz coaches defense, he wants to get there with his front four. He's also consistently, wherever he's been, Tennessee, Buffalo, Detroit, and Philly, of course. Couldn't think of Philly. Wherever he's been, he's always had at least one elite defensive tackle. And obviously, that is the number one thing that the Browns have to get done this offseason is improve that position. I'm going to take a break. When I come back, I'll talk more about what the Browns need to do, what tools they need to be able to put in Jim Schwartz's toolbox. That's coming up next. I'm suspenders out today, baby. Suspenders out and loving it. Boom. That's good. First, let me tell you about, I want to tell you about Bet Online. Obviously, gambling now legal in the state of Ohio. BetOnline.net, your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. All of it, football, baseball, basketball, soccer, doesn't matter. BetOnline.net. If you love sports podcasts, they have those as well at BetOnline.net. They're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. Bet Online, where the game starts. All right, we don't start. We continue talking about the Browns and new defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz. I think most people are in favor of the hire. I am in favor of the hire. A lot to like about the hiring of Jim Schwartz. And the next thing I want to get to is now what tools do you put in his toolbox? Jay Crawford asked today on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, he said, you know, who would you put a check mark next to on the Browns if you're Jim Schwartz? Like, okay, this guy's really good. I'm good here. And his first response was, well, it's just one guy, Myles Garrett. I think it's more to it than that. I think there's different levels. Obviously, Myles Garrett is a whole nother level of player compared to the other, you know, sure things or potential sure things on the Browns. But I do think, you know, I've said this a couple of times recently. I think we overrated the Browns' talent coming into the season. However, We didn't overrate it by that much. There was a lot of talent that did not play as well. Some of that's on the players, some of that's on the coaches. So the Browns are more talented than they showed this year. Maybe not quite as talented as we thought. We always overrate our own teams. I think that's fair to say a little bit. That happens. Browns are still a very talented team. And I do think at cornerback, the Browns are set. I think they have 3 good corners. I know Denzel Ward wasn't great this year, but he played better in the second half. If you look at the PFF grades on Greg Newsome this year, they were not bad. I know he doesn't get any picks, but even the best cornerback only picks off about maybe 6 or 7 interceptions in a season. That's not a lot of plays. It's most of the time a cornerback is doing a good job, even if he doesn't get a pick. So I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm just saying they're good at corner. I think Grant Delpit showed some progress at safety, and I definitely think there's a lot of potential with JOK. Now, beyond that, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. The Browns need a minimum of 4 new starters on defense, and it could be as many as 5 or even 6. I think of 12 starters, right? 3 corners because you play nickel a lot, 2 safeties, 3 linebackers, even though a lot of times you only use 2, and 4 defensive linemen. The Browns only have 1 starter on the defensive line. Now, some of those new starters might be the young guys that are on the team, but obviously the Browns need 2 new starters at defensive tackle. They need another defensive end because Clowney's going to be gone. They need a true middle linebacker. And they might need a safety depending on what they do with John Johnson. I'm fine. John Johnson's generally been a disappointment this time with the Browns. I'm okay if they want to run it back with the entire secondary. Greedy Williams is going to be gone, but if they want to bring their top 5 guys, Delpit, Johnson, and the 3 corners we talked about, bring those guys back and go with the same 5 guys in the secondary as your top 5 guys, I'm good with that, with JOK and Myles Garrett. But that's 7 guys. I need, they need to add 2 defensive tackles, 2 linebackers, certainly 1 clearly a middle linebacker, and they need, another defensive end or 2 in the mix. So the Browns have a lot of work to do on the defensive side, but it's not as much. It's not a crazy amount, is what I'm saying. It's not, it's not like you have to rebuild the whole defense. But the front 7 has a lot of, the only short things are starters. There's some other guys, a guy like Perry Winfrey is going to be on the team. But the only short things in terms of starters is Myles Garrett, certainly, and probably JOK. Beyond that, I don't think there's and the only reason I say JOK is because they just drafted him 2 years ago, and he was drafted high. Based on what he's done on the field, I don't think he's a guaranteed starter. But I think a smart coach like Jim Schwartz is going to be able to find a way to use a guy like JOK. Beyond that, it may be some guys on the team, but there needs to be some exterior additions on the defensive line and linebacker, whether it's through the draft again or through free agency. Now, you'd like to see them add 1, truly elite defensive tackle. I've been talking about Deron Payne quite a bit. Now, I'm probably wasting my time because he's probably going to get franchised by Washington, but you saw him play against the Browns towards the end of the season. Guy's a tremendous young player in the prime of his career. I'd love to see them get him, but again, it may not be realistic. Later in the week, we'll talk more about what the offense needs. Certainly less holes on the offensive side of the ball than on the defensive side of the ball. But I think the Browns are a better football team today than they were yesterday. And obviously, they haven't added any players yet. Free agency is going to start in 2 months. And we'll see what they do and how aggressive the Browns are. Obviously, for the first time this year, they're going to have to deal with the salary cap. Doesn't mean they have a problem. It just means that they're going to have to really deal with it. They've been so far under the cap for so many years. That's not going to be the case. They're going to have to rework some contracts. They've got, we always talk about them having the smartest guys. Some people complain that they think they're too smart, which I think is stupid. I don't think you can be too smart. However, they are going to have to be certainly more creative now because they are going to go over the cap soon. That's why they're going to have to do some things to, work on that. But I'm not worried about it. I think they'll be fine in that vein. So, but again, in the end, I like the hiring of Jim Schwartz. We did a poll on the show today. And the options were, do you like the hiring, wait and see, or you hate it? I think it was 40-something% said like it, 40-something% said wait and see, and 5% said I hate it. I don't understand why you'd hate this move. Maybe just because he's not overly aggressive in terms of blitzing. I would like to see the Browns play a more aggressive style in the secondary in terms of attacking the receivers instead of playing passively in the zone too much. We'll see how that shakes out. But I think the Browns have clearly upgraded from a defensive coordinator with little experience to a defensive coordinator with a ton of experience, who's been a head coach in the league, can be the head coach of the defense, and knows how to deal with personalities more. And he brings the fire. We were told that by DeQuell. We were told that by Aditi today on the TV show. So it looks to be a good move, but only time will tell. We'll see how we can be excited about it. When he eventually speaks, we can win the press conference as the coaches usually do. But until we see what this team looks like on the field, until we see some players that the Browns had here improve, until we see a system that looks cohesive without consistent breakdowns. Everybody's going to have a breakdown on defense. Even the best defenses have breakdowns. The Browns had a lot of them. That's what you can't have. All right, quick break, and we'll talk about what we saw on the field this past weekend. 6 first-round NFL playoff games. We'll take a final look at those games and look ahead to week 2 in the playoffs, the 4 big games in the divisional round coming up this weekend. That's all right here in the bullpen with Adam the Bull. Okay. All right. Let's talk some NFL playoffs. Let's begin with the Saturday games. On Saturday, the first game of the day was a good half of football. Unfortunately, the second half was terrible. The Seahawks scored 17 second-quarter points and led the Niners 17-6 at the half. In the end, it was all Niners. They pulled away in the second half. I'm still not a believer long-term in Brock Purdy. However, I'm not even sure I'm a total believer in the short term, but the guy plays with confidence. There's no doubt about it. He's made a lot of good throws. He's done an amazing job for the 7th-round pick. Remarkable. So kudos to him. He's got, in terms of long-term, we'll see. I think there are, even though I'm not sold, I think it's crazy that some people, like, look at what the coaching has done to him. He could do it to anybody. Well, maybe Brock Purdy's a good quarterback, and just guys missed. It doesn't happen often that a guy who ends up being a late pick ends up being a good quarterback, but it happens once in a while. Maybe this is it. Or maybe it's a short-term thing, or maybe it's the coach, whatever. I don't think the coach can take a bad quarterback and make him great. Maybe for a short period of time can make him good, but this guy's playing really well. Now, guys were running wide open. The Niners had guys. The Seahawks defense is terrible. Dallas' defense should be better, but kudos to Brock Purdy. He made a lot of big throws when he needed to. The nightcap on Saturday, what can you say that hasn't been said already? The Chargers blow a 27-0 lead, lose 31-30. Trevor Lawrence was hideous in the first half and was phenomenal in the second half. What a turnaround. We all, myself certainly included, criticized them for their free agent moves. But Christian Kirk, Evan Engram, Zay Jones, Marvin Jones, these guys have all done a great job. No superstars in the skill position there. Travis Etienne, who was drafted in the first round in 2021, got injured, missed the whole season. He did a great job, and Lawrence has really done a magnificent job the second half of the year. And again, after the first half, he was awful. As for the Chargers, Justin Herbert has still not won a playoff game. It was his first playoff game. Brandon Staley did not get fired. They did fire the OC. Herbert didn't make any plays in the second half. The game plan was poor. They should have ran the ball a little bit in the second half. That's an epic all-time collapse. It's really hard to believe, but that's what happened. You better believe it because It did happen. Sunday. Bills beat the Dolphins 34. But both the Bills and the Bengals played very sloppy games in different types of ways. Neither one played particularly well. I do think the Ravens with Tyler Huntley are a better team than the Dolphins are with Skylar Thompson, because the Ravens have a much better defense than the Dolphins. But still, both those teams had no business winning. Bengals were an 8-point favorite. The Bills were a 13-point favorite. And both had to hold on at the end. Dolphins in the first game come back, down 14-0 early. They're up down just 3 at the half, and they lose 34-31. Josh Allen sloppy. You look at the numbers, 352 yards, 3 touchdowns, great, but turnovers. There was a stretch of time when the Dolphins were beating them up a little bit. Neither team ran the ball much. Dolphins with a huge blunder late, 4th and 1 late in the game, a chance to potentially win or take the lead. Well, get a first down and eventually tie or take the lead. But they get a delay a game on a 4th and 1, at least to a 4th and 6. They don't get the first down. That's it. So Bills sloppy, but good teams survive. And that's what the Bills did. They took care of business. They did what they had to do. This is not college football. There's no ranking system. All that matters is getting the W. In the end, when the game is over, that's all that matters. And the Bills took care of business at home. They'll host the Bengals, who beat the Ravens in the Sunday Nighter 24-17. Really weird game. Bengals had a 9-0 lead early. Felt like they were in control. Then the Ravens got going in the middle 2 quarters. They had the ball for almost the entire second and third quarter. Bengals got it once, it seemed, and they had a good drive in the third quarter, got a touchdown. But still, the game, when the Bengals scored that touchdown, Ravens came right back to tie it. It was 17-17 early in the fourth quarter. Ravens had the ball at the Bengals 1-inch line. We also, if you didn't see it, Tyler Huntley tries to jump over the top, really more from the 1-yard line than the 1-inch line. It gets knocked out. I think it was Logan Wilson, if I remember correctly, that knocked the ball out of his hands. And Sam Hubbard picks it up, returns it 98 yards for a touchdown. Probably should have been a block in the back on that. What are you going to do? Bengals hold on. Ravens try to move down the field late in the game. Can't do it. 24-17, Bengals win. So they didn't play great in their first game. The bigger issue for them is their offensive line. In the last 3 weeks, they've lost their starting right tackle, right guard, and now left tackle. The right tackle, La'el Collins, is out for the year. The right guard, Alex Kappa. And the left tackle, oh my God, I just forgot his name, Jonah Williams. They are both week to week. My guess is neither plays this week. I don't know. The Bengals, they're off. So that offensive line's a big issue going into that game with the Bills. That's a big advantage because the two teams are pretty evenly matched. Giants, very impressive win. Good job out of them. Beating the Vikings. I know nobody wants to say that was an upset. Of course it was an upset. They were on the road. And it wasn't a 4-5 game where the 5 team was better than the 4. This was a 2-6 game. The Vikings were a great team. They had been 8-1 at home. And Kirk Cousins played well. They didn't lose this game because of Kirk Cousins. They lost this game because the Vikings defense was trash. Daniel Jones played great. Man, what a turnaround for him. 300 yards passing, 78 on the ground. Touched the ball 52 times. I mean, he's a quarterback. 35 passes and 17 runs by Daniel Jones. 2 touchdowns total. They hold on when the Vikings fail on a 4th and long. That wasn't Cousins' fault either. He had nowhere to go with the ball. And finally, last night, have we seen the end of Tom Brady? Cowboys destroy the Buccaneers 31-14. It was 31-6. So the game was never really close. It was 18-0 at halftime. For Dallas, it's their first road win in forever in the playoffs. I picked them to go to the Super Bowl when the playoffs started because everybody was picking the Niners, and I'm a little worried about Jalen Hurts. So I'm like, I get the feeling if the Cowboys can beat Brady, they can get on a run. I think they got a good shot to upset San Francisco. We'll see. Tom Brady threw 66 passes in his final start. Tony Pollard obviously becoming the premier guy in the backfield for Dallas. It's pretty obvious for a while. The tough thing for Dallas, Brett Maher, their kicker, who was great all year, one of the best kickers in the league, missed his first 4 extra points attempts before finally making the last one. And you don't know where his head's at. I mean, it didn't matter last night, but, against the Niners, you're probably going to need those kicks. That makes it tricky. Can they trust him? They're probably not going to cut him because he's been so good all year, but the kicker's got to make the kicks. Can't miss 4 extra points. In this case, they could, but, you're not going to get that lucky twice. So we look ahead to the divisional round. Saturday, Jaguars-Chiefs, 4:30 on NBC. Giants-Eagles, 8:15 on Fox. And then on Sunday, you got the Bengals-Bills, 3 o'clock on CBS, and the Cowboys-49ers at 6:30 on Fox. Make picks on those games on Friday. Coming up on tomorrow's podcast, I am going to do my fan questions. I've been doing that every Tuesday because we didn't have a show on Monday. I'm going to do that tomorrow. So send me your fan questions. I'll tweet about it tonight as well. And that's it. Make sure you subscribe to the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. You'll get alerts whenever I do a podcast or whenever the show puts out a podcast or we have a overtime show or do a YouTube short or something like that. I'll talk to you tomorrow with your questions that I answer. Where else but right here in the bullpen with Adam the Bull. See ya.